Hello everyone, welcome back to the MotoGP Podcast preview of round 6 at Le Mans in France. Doesn't feel like round 6 to be honest. It feels like there's been, I can't really understand where the season's kind of went already, but yeah, we've had a test in between this. We've had a few things come out and a couple of surgeries for a couple of riders for arm pump. Yeah, here to talk about all that and more is Lewis Duncan and Pete McLaren. Joining me, Jordan Moorland. Pete, we'll start with you. Testing happens after a race at Jerez. It's kind of tradition, but it happens a lot. What do you make of that test? Did anything kind of crop out to you that you think, well, that was an interesting spot, or do you just think it was very sort of hush hush? We didn't really get much video or sort of reaction to it.
No, but I suppose there's a few. It's that first big test, isn't it? The first sort of European in-season test of the year. So it's sort of a milestone during the season where people target the first sort of big upgrades and things like that. And I suppose top of that list is probably the Yamaha engine, isn't it? You know, all the headlines being made by the V4. All the attention, if you're talking about the Japanese manufacturers, on Honda needing more power from their engine, and yet Yamaha prove that, good to their word. They are still pushing with the current bike, and it sounded good, didn't it? It sounded promising. I mean, the numbers, they're not going to be big at Jerez, which is a short track, small straights, but they certainly felt that it sort of ticked the sort of magical boxes of more performance without losing the handling, which is always the worry. The Japanese especially have taken a long time with their engines to get this cornering and entry and all these things sorted out, and sounds like they've kept all the good parts of the engine and just built the performance up. So another boost for Yamaha potentially coming, after a great weekend, the pole, the podium for Quartararo, and then heading into, of course, his home round, which we'll get to later. So, yeah, another boost for them. And, of course, it wasn't just Quartararo that was quick. Rins was up there as well, which is another good sign. I think that, for development-wise, that seemed to be the biggest step. It was obviously high grip, after a race. It's always the same, isn't it? You've got to be a bit careful with reading too much into actual lap time. So often it's feeling that people are looking for more than numbers, let's say. Windy as well by the sound of it. So that wasn't great, especially with testing error and things like that. But certainly, step there from Yamaha. Mir tried the prototype engine that Aleix had in his bike, said it was a small step, but again, wants to be sure that it wasn't just those conditions, on that day. Wants to try it again somewhere else, so we'll see. But again, seem to not mess with, let's say, the good character of the existing engine, which they're looking for. Other guys, it sounded like setup, didn't it? From what I heard, a lot of the other teams, they were sort of looking for something. I suppose someone a bit further down the order, Ralph Fernandez, seemed to think that he made a big step. He was somebody who's really, really struggled, hasn't he, this year? He's saying, let's wait and see again, like the others. But he popped into the top 10. So, yeah, let's see what carries on from there. And of course, top of the timesheets, we should say Marc Marquez, isn't it? Coming back from the mistake. And there he is, top of both sessions during the day and fastest overall. So at least getting that chance to immediately show that, it was just a blip. But I think we kind of all knew that, didn't we? It comes back to what Hervé said, isn't it, when we spoke to him a couple of weeks back, which is Marc Marquez's main rival in the past anyway has often been Marc Marquez, and that's how it's kind of turned out so far this year, hasn't it? The two races that he's lost have been because probably he's made a mistake. Let's face it, Cota was in the bag and Jerez was the clear favourite, wasn't he? So, yeah, it's Marc Marquez versus Marc Marquez at the moment, isn't it? A little bit, but let's see what happens at Le Mans. Let's hope a few other manufacturers can at least get up there like Quartararo did on the podium.
Yeah, that's a good point about Marquez, Pete. I imagine after the mistake on Sunday, he had Monday morning, he was up from like 6:30 to wake Alex up just to be like, yeah, I'm going out to test here. I'm going to go out and do a bit of angry push laps. And yeah, he done like the 5th fastest lap ever of Jerez with his fastest lap in the afternoon. So it just tells you he was pretty comfortable with his setup. And I don't think the windy conditions really bothered him too much. Luis Pecco Bagnaia, he was, I think, 17th in the afternoon session. He said he had a lot of stuff to test in the list that he had and didn't get round to trying out something with the sprint fuel tank that we've talked about. But he seems to think that he's found two things that he can bring to Le Mans and maybe improve. What do you make of those comments?
We'll see. I mean, as Pete said, Jerez quite a tricky track to kind of any post-race test is quite a tricky one to really read into because of the grip levels. think back to Misano last year when we thought that the KTM, had made quite a big step around from Misano, and then we've come to this season and it's not quite gone that way. Yeah, I mean, as we've spoken about at length already, Jordan, that we do just need to wait and see until we get to the next race weekend to see if those improvements that Pecco thinks he's found are legitimate. He's a bit of pressure on him. We're going to a good track for Ducati. Well, I suppose every track's a good track for Ducati now, but Le Mans especially, they've won there the past 4 years. Past 5 years actually, if you think back to the wet race in 2020 with Petrucci. So
that's right, yeah.
It's been a good track for them. It's also been a good track for satellite Ducati riders. And Alex Marquez goes into there on a real purple patch right now, looking to kind of see if he can get another win under his belt. So that just kind of puts things into focus a little bit as well. That there is a big step is needed here. It's it's a track that we know Marc will be quick at. He was quick there last year despite qualifying 13th.
Yeah.
He came through to nearly win that Grand Prix. So, and I think he did end up beating Pecco in the end, didn't he? Overhauled him quite late on. So
last lap overtake, yeah. He got
the last couple of years, it's not been the friendliest for circuits to Pecco either. There was the unfortunate collision a couple of years ago with Maverick. So it's not the happiest of hunting grounds for Pecco this track. So that's kind of unfortunately puts the pressure on him a bit more when we get in the run up to the event, that people will be looking at what he said previously, the results previously, and obviously the last few years at Le Mans. So it's going to be a tricky one. This is a circuit where you do need a good front end, and we know that's where Pecco has really struggled. So I guess from the off in FP1, if things are at a better level, it will be immediately noticeable for him, and that's really what Pecco needs. He needs to have kind of a fully clean weekend of hit the ground running in FP1, into Q2 easily, work on the sprint fuel tank stuff and get something going in the sprints. For me, I don't necessarily care if he wins a sprint or not. I just want him to be in the fight for the win. If he doesn't come away with it, that's fine, but he needs to be there, because so far we haven't seen that. I think that's fair in the sprints. We haven't seen him really threaten on the Saturday. And if he could do that, then there is absolutely no reason he can't go and win the Grand Prix on Sunday. But it is going to be tricky, because Marc's obviously got a point to prove after Jerez. Alex is on a real purple patch, as we said. Who knows what's going to happen with the Yamahas? It's a good circuit for the Yamaha,
Very
and Fabio Quartararo particular as well. We know it's been a pretty good circuit for the Honda over the years, so yeah, should be a good weekend. And obviously with Le Mans, you never know what the weather's going to do. It'll either be baking hot or it'll be cold and rainy. Anyone who's been to the French Grand Prix knows the extremes you can get at Le Mans at this time of year.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a few points in that. Pete, what about Bagnaia last year in the sprint? Do you remember he had the crash in qualifying, and then it completely offset his sprint where he had that sort of... the Ducati just kind of went computer says no and just turned off and was trying to throw him off. He needs to avoid that sort of weekend again, because past 2 weekends, I'm not saying that the crash that he had on the Saturday at Jerez in practice kind of offset him, but he had one in qualifying at Qatar and it hurt him. He's going to need to try, as Lewis says, have a clean run on Friday and Saturday, isn't he? Just to try and understand, this is the best I can possibly be heading into both races. This is the target, because the work that he's done at the test is kind of, this is the real test now, isn't it, coming to a weekend?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it ties in, doesn't it? The qualifying, but also his difficulty with fighting in the race, isn't it? That he spoke about in the Spanish Grand Prix, that he couldn't get by Quartararo, could he? He couldn't get close to him in the fast corners and things like that, which again, and Quartararo's performance showed as well, didn't it? Qualify, because he's complained only a couple of races back. Both he and Rins were saying we can't fight in the races, everything else.
Yeah.
But when you can start up front, it just shows what a difference that makes, doesn't it? So that feeds into your point. If Bagnaia can start at the front, then that in itself is going to make a big difference for his performances. So yeah, qualifying is so much pressure, isn't there, on them to do well. But yeah, it's interesting that Bagnaia is now also saying that following other bikes, and particularly Alex Marquez, wasn't it? He was saying, look, I couldn't follow the bike that is basically very similar to what he has now. And he's looking for answers as to why that is. So obviously at Ducati, they're in a better situation to sort of solve that, because they can look at all the data, can't they, of all the different bikes. And Pecco was saying, look, we can see on the data that Alex is much quicker in these corners, the fast corners, things like that. I'm not able to do that with the current setup, and that's kind of what he was trying to work on, I guess. But interesting that he even the best bike on the grid is having these issues that previously we've heard the likes of Quartararo, the Hondas as well, saying, we can't fight, we can't overtake. Now it seems that, it can happen to pretty much anyone. So, yeah, just feeds into what you're saying about you've got to start at the front. And that means, no mistakes in qualifying and a good start, holding your position in it's become these big early battles, isn't it? These big frantic opening laps of nobody wanting to lose position or trying to recover from maybe a bad start or something. And I think we'll see more of that at Le Mans. And things happen at Le Mans, don't they? It's just a sort of place where on and off track, there's been a lot of things over the years, right? Back to things like Casey Stoner retiring, I remember, in the Thursday press conference and sort of stunning everybody by saying he'd retire at the end of the year. And the track incidents, all the chicanes, it just feeds into people crossing lines and messing each other up and running on. And it's an event where a lot happens. So certainly staying out of trouble by being at the front is the first step.
Absolutely. And just reminded me, I think I'm right in saying that, is it turn 2 or 3, whatever they have it at the top of the hill? That's the most crashed corner, isn't it, on the calendar across all classes throughout the weekend? So, not to be putting it on anybody here, but the stats do say that across all classes, you're going to see the crashes most likely. And as Lewis touched on, if it's wet, there's another element there as well. I mean, think how many crashes I remember back to 2020, actually, thinking about that. Joan Mir had that unbelievable crash where he slid off and he just picked himself up through the gravel, almost ran into the crash, which is amazing. And you go back and watch the footage of that. But it's one of those circuits that it's got proper character, hasn't it? It's it just feels sort of like the amount of people there as well and the noise. And I've never been there, but I always hear when you're in the pit lane, the way it's built, when the bikes go past, it really makes a racket, doesn't it, Lewis?
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable one. You're going through the paddock to go and speak to someone, or just, go find some lunch. It can be really noisy. A lot of people don't like going to Le Mans. I love it. I've always loved going to the French Grand Prix. And it's a shame I won't be missing it this year because it is a great event. Le Mans is a really pretty town. It's a really lovely place. Yeah. The circuit itself, as far as if you're a fan, it's under €100 to go for a weekend. That includes camping. If you've got kids, they come for free. It gives you roving grandstand. You've got the tram to and from the town. So it's one of the few circuits in the world actually where it's got really good public transport connections as well. As we go to a lot of places, racetracks in the middle of nowhere, Silverstone's in the middle of nowhere. Aragon's in the middle of nowhere. You go to a lot of these places and they're not near anything. Le Mans is different, and the atmosphere at Le Mans is great. And as Pete says, something always happens. There's always just something interesting about Le Mans, and I feel that probably, not to get all sort of, spooky and mystical about it, but obviously Le Mans is this iconic venue, isn't it? Obviously it's famous for the 24 hours, but it just, because of that, the place exudes something that, something special always just, it just happens, and it's great that it is probably the most popular event on the calendar right now, and it is as well attended as it is, and as well run, because I think the calendar would be a lot poorer without it.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. It's got that sort of feel of I love the way you go Jerez, Le Mans. Well, it used to be Mugello, but you get what I mean? You have those 3 big headers all after, and you're like, jeez, this is what MotoGP's all about. And then you've got Assen. It's definitely got something, Lewis, and it's one of those circuits. I think when I was younger, I was like, why people like this so much? But then I realised it's a full party atmosphere at it, and it's like a festival. I think I seen videos last year. Fabio Quartararo unveiled his livery at 7:30 at night, and it's the grandstands were packed all the way around just to see the livery on the home straight, and you think that's passion. And the French organisers, they get so much praise, I think, and they deserve it, because they understand what, as you said, Lewis, the ticket prices, the transport, the camping, it's affordable, and you get passionate people there who all love MotoGP, don't they?
I just want to say that as well. The French fans are great. They're among the absolute best in the world as far as I'm concerned. The last couple of times I was there, just the hospitality and everything of the fans are really just so engaged, so switched on about MotoGP. It's a really, really great event, and the fact they've got now 2 really front running French riders there in Zarco and Quartararo, and both of them look like they are genuinely kind of back, towards the upper half of the top 10 than they have been for the past few years. It's just going to set that place on fire if they can get any kind of results going. And yeah, it's going to be a great weekend, and because of that, it will make things a bit trickier for your kind of established front running championship contenders, because if you're Fabio Quartararo and you're in the position you were in at Jerez with absolutely nothing to lose, you're gonna go for it in front of your home crowds, because the payoff there, if you crash, it doesn't matter, the fans are going to stand by you, whatever, and at least you gave it a go. If it pulls off, you come away with a podium or a win, that's French, straight into the annals of French motorsport history. There's so yeah, I think it's going to be a great event.
Yeah, I do too, and I'll totally agree with the French fans. I shared a couple of beers with them at Valencia a few years ago. Yeah,
just a couple.
Oh, just a couple. Yeah, they had certainly they'd had a few before I'd even joined them, and they were they're good fun, so they are. And touching on that, Pete, about the French riders, the expectation. Do you think it's a benefit to Quartararo's coming off a good result, or it's a hindrance to him? Because is it going to be like, oh, there's so much pressure? But I think that he knows anyway, no matter when he turns up, they're all going to be there for him. And you seen it a few years ago when Zarco got pole position on the Tech 3 Yamaha. I mean, the place went nuts, and like he crashed out of the Grand Prix, but still to have a Frenchman on pole was pretty cool. And if they do that again this year, I mean, it would just be amazing, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, it would. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, as you guys have been saying, the fans really make the event, don't they? If you look at the track on paper, it's not that special. It's actually much more complicated in real life, isn't it? With all the ups and downs and, as you say, the temperature. But throw in all of those fans and it just creates a great atmosphere. And as you say, two French guys, and Zarco's really popular, isn't he? I mean, okay, on paper he hasn't had the success obviously Quartararo's had, but he's sort of seen as being one of the fans, if you know what I mean. They identify really well with him, man of the people sort of thing, isn't it? It's that connection that you have. And even when he was saying, when he moved to Honda, he thought, they're not really going to back me, because what am I going to do last year when the bike wasn't competitive? And yet, he was kind of overwhelmed that they were still, supporting him just as strongly. Now he's coming back, and as you say, Quartararo's on the crest of a wave, and seems to, he copes with the pressure quite well, doesn't he? He has been in a position where he's been a favourite coming into the French Grand Prix, and he normally steps up and delivers. And you've got Zarco as well, who's been on the podium in Le Mans a couple of times, isn't he? I think over the years he rises to the occasion. And I suppose we could throw in as well the Tech 3 team. You've got Viñales, who's also on a really good run of form, second at the test, I suppose we should add as well. So there's a lot for the local fans to be cheering about, and they're noisy enough anyway. So I think it'll make for an incredible atmosphere.
Anything to add to that, Lewis?
Yeah, the point about Zarco is an interesting one, because for years and years, when we had Fabio, he was just world champion and he was this hot rookie, and we kind of, you remember back to the end of 2019 when Zarco didn't really look like he had much of a future. He didn't want to go to Avintia, and there was this real kind of push from the French Grand Prix organisers and Dorna that we need Zarco because we don't think that Quartararo is the same kind of level as him. Which I think is kind of smoothed out over the years, but I was always curious about this, and then a few years ago at the French Grand Prix, speaking to some fans, they were like, the reason we like Zarco so much is because he comes across as like your big brother. You listen to him speak on television, he comes across like that. He's not the superstar, he's not the big flashy lifestyle type thing, and I guess that makes sense if you look back over the history of France. They're very much a people that are, very unified people. Is very, one for all type kind of mentality from, throughout French history. And that makes sense. Like I say, I think obviously over the years that Quartararo has endeared himself much, much more. But yeah, Zarco remains this hot favourite, and it's not an enigma, but it's definitely an odd one, just given... this is given obviously what you have in Quartararo, the French fans just still have this affinity for Zarco.
I think it's kind of similar to maybe down the years with the Spanish, in terms of having Danny Pedrosa always there, even though Marc was kind of winning. I always got the sense that Danny was kind of like the favourite still, because they grew up watching him, and it was like he was the guy. And he had, obviously with Zarco being a double Moto2 world champion, that kind of elevated him obviously, and they kind of stuck with him through all of it. And I think they're very loyal, the French fans, as you say. They want to kind of see someone that's very similar to them do well. And yeah, I wish Zarco was my big brother. He's pretty cool, isn't he? That he says, I love how he speaks. I love the way he portrays himself. He's very sort of like, I think he just comes across, as you said, does very well to them, and they can just latch onto that. I'd love to see him do something on the Honda. I think it would be, I mean, I don't want to say pressure on him because like every rider has pressure, but I think that Zarco not feels it more than Quartararo, but I think he feels the duty more to deliver on home soil, if that makes sense. It's just one of those things, like age, experience. It just, yeah, he's got that sort of.
Yeah, and he knows there's not too many more years left in his career as well. You know, he's looking at least having another 2-year contract with Honda if that can come to pass, and I think he's more than justified that, regardless of all the noise going on around Honda right now. There is a place for Zarco, I think. But he knows, you know, there's not too many more years left where he can really embrace that French crowd, really do something in front of them, and you know, so I don't think it's pressure. I think it's just, you know, he knows he's closer to the end of his career than the start of it, and he knows that every opportunity to race at Le Mans is an opportunity to savour now. And I think if he can put the Honda on the podium there, or at least get very close to it, that's, you know, that I wouldn't be surprised if he considered that one of his, you know, the bigger results of what has been a very good career so far.
Absolutely. Pete, we'll just touch on the other riders. You touched on Maverick there. What do you think of his, not resurgence, it's the wrong word, but it has been a sort of, I said last week on the podcast, me and Lewis, he's shown his maturity, isn't he, now, a lot, and it's really nice to see that from Maverick in terms of he's kind of became not the de facto leader at KTM, but he's kind of showing the other riders this is the way you need to go. And you've got Brad Binder kind of looking at the way Maverick's doing things. Yes, Pedro Acosta and does his own thing, but he's probably going, Maverick's only been on that bike for 5 rounds, and look what he's doing whilst we're struggling. It's good to see that from Maverick, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. I think it's been impressive how he's stuck to his plan, if you like. You know, let's face it, testing was pretty difficult, wasn't it? And you know, all the way through saying, look, it's a process. We're going step by step. We're working on the bike, and you always think, okay, that's fine for a bit, but you know, how long will that last? And then riders will get frustrated. But he's stuck with that plan. He's kept cool. He's kept calm, and you know, true to his word. He's got there, isn't he? He's got a bike now that, as you say, the other KTMs are looking at and thinking, well, you know, we'd like to be doing that as well. He doesn't seem to have had any big new pieces or anything like that. He's just he's got this different balance that he found in warm-up in Argentina that he seems to have stuck with. And then, you know, the chatter that we know is a problem for all the KTMs. He's just sort of trying to find a way to ride around it or avoid it as much as he can. I think it's still there. I don't think there's been any magical fix for that. It's just that he's found a way to deal with it better. And he's sort of picked off, he's worked on the weaknesses, the corner entry that he wasn't happy with, made a step there, and he's trying to avoid the sort of the other problems with the vibration. And yeah, I think it's just been really impressive to see him consistent, isn't it? That's what we've always been looking for from Viñales, and to do it with such a, let's say, you know, a difficult bike, let's say, is even more impressive, I think. You know, 2 very different tracks, obviously Qatar, and now, you know, Jerez, now Le Mans. Let's see if he can make it 3 in a row. We have to remember he was fast, wasn't he, at Kota last year and Portimao, which again are 2 different tracks. So that's the only thing. But I think this weekend, if he can do it 3 in a row, I think that really does show that, yeah, they're on top of, you know, they're on top of something there. And yeah, as you say, I think he would justify that tag of sort of team leader at KTM, because he does seem to understand what the bike needs at this moment in time.
Of course, yeah, and I will say, historically, a very good circuit for Maverick Viñales. Took his first ever Grand Prix win in 125s here. He beat Nico Tirol on the last lap. Go back and watch that, 2011. It's a really good last lap. And he also took a victory in MotoGP in 2017 when he beat Valentino Rossi on the last lap. And also took his first MotoGP podium on Suzuki here as well. So Maverick has, it's a good circuit for Maverick in the past. I'm supposed to get on to the championship leader, Lewis, Alex Marquez. Took his first ever MotoGP podium here in the wet at Le Mans 2020 on the Honda. It's a circuit that I think it should suit pretty much everybody, and it'll suit that Ducati. You said a good thing at the start. I really like that. The satellite teams have won the last 3 Grand Prix here, which is a really good stat, actually. So Alex kind of has history on his side here that should suggest that he might make it 4. But what does he need to do coming into this weekend? Is it basically do the same thing again, wait for your opportunity, or can he take it a step further and challenge, say, his brother or Pecco if they're at the front?
I think he just needs to keep doing what he's doing. I don't think he needs to overcomplicate it. Come into the weekend at least knowing that you are the second fastest rider right now. That's the mentality, and I don't mean that to kind of be critical. Like he knows himself that all things even, Marc is the fastest rider right now. At the very least, come into the weekend, start it as where you have been, which is the second fastest Ducati rider, and then build into it, see where the opportunities come. There's something about Le Mans, if you look over the past few years, as I said, you look at Bastianini winning in 22, you look at Bez winning in 23, It does just seem to suit those year-old bikes a little bit more. I don't know if it's maybe because of the layout or whatever, where it's just, having a dialed-in setup on a bike that is very well established at that point just gives you that bit of an advantage. I think that is probably the case. It is, as Pete said, it's quite a technical layout. You've got fast corners, lots of really slow chicanes, that type of things, downhill braking, uphill acceleration. You've got all sorts of different things where to get the bike perfect is difficult. So if you've got that advantage of having a bike that already, it's a bike that won at Le Mans last year that Alex Marquez is on, so he knows what is needed. So yeah, I think just do what you do and what you have been doing, and then take it from there. Take the opportunities when they come. I think Alex Marquez has been arguably the smartest rider on the grid this year, in terms of he knows what he's capable of when everyone's on their bikes, and he knows what he can do when the opportunities arise. And I think he just needs to keep doing that. Qatar, there was a bit of a blip there, but fundamentally I think we were looking at a rider who was probably going to be at the podium, or certainly in that fight for it anyway. So yeah, that's it. Don't overcomplicate it. I don't think he will. He's got that first win, but if anything, that'll make things a bit easier because he's not now looking for it. He's got the first win. If it doesn't come at Le Mans, it doesn't matter because he's got it now. If he gets another podium, that's better because it keeps him nice. And if Marc wins and Alex is second, that still keeps him right there in the championship fight and keeping the pressure there on Marc, which we know Marc has been susceptible to some mistakes already this year. And the person to pick up the pieces, for the most part, has been Alex. You led the championship after Austin. He obviously won the race at Jerez and has taken the championship lead again. So he just doesn't need to overcomplicate it. And I think that's what the Gresini team have always been really, really good at with the riders, is getting them to keep their game simple. You know where the bike is strong. You know where you're strong. We're not going to have any real, brand new bits from the factory this weekend, in theory anyway. Let's just do what we've been doing. Let the factory guys kind of struggle around, get the bike set up to where they need to be, and we'll just, hit the ground running from FP1. And it's worked for them in the past, and it's continuing to work for them now.
Absolutely. Pete, what do you make of that? 107 points better off Alex Marquez is compared to this point last year. it's incredible, isn't it? The transformation. I don't know if it's a transformation. It's just I think he's just clicked there. He's just got everything together, hasn't he? It's just that it's always been there, sort of thing. It's just came out now.
Yeah, that's a great start, isn't it? Yeah, and it just underlines the step that he's made. The winning confidence, I think that's the bit that I'm interested to see how that will change him. How that pressure will, being lifted off his shoulders, if you like, of when you're going to win. Now that's gone. We saw he did make a few mistakes in practice at Jerez, falling off, didn't he? And some of the other riders were saying, look, Alex is taking risks because, he was maybe a bit anxious, maybe that, to perform his home race and everything else. Now he's got that confidence, as you guys have said, of winning, winning in Grand Prix. He doesn't need to prove anything, if you like, almost. He, already in the Jerez weekend, he sort of spelled it out, didn't he? He said, look, people saying, how do you beat Marc? And he said, look, Marc is not going to have 22 perfect races. So as Lewis was explaining, you've got to be there to take advantage when he has a difficult race or makes a mistake, I guess. And that's exactly what he did. And I think, there's no need to change that game plan, which is just working so well for him, isn't it? And but let's just see how that confidence changes. He is now a MotoGP race winner. I think that we will see a changed Alex Marquez for the better, just from that alone, that maybe if he's not, at the top of the timesheets in first practice, it'll be, look, don't worry about it. Don't overstress yourself. Don't, take risks on maybe a cold or damp track. As Lewis was saying, the weather is always tricky. You don't need to. You can do this. You've got that confidence, I think, which is always a big part of motorcycle racing. So yeah, let's see where he takes that confidence from here. Can he? I think he said that Marc is still half a step ahead, and I think he's probably right there, isn't he? As you guys said, I don't think he's looking and saying, right, I'm going to take the fight to Marc this weekend, but he's looking at building, doing his own thing, and seeing what happens. And let's see. I mean, you can't imagine that this is just going to be a one-off win for Alex. I think there's going to be more this year. The question is how many more, isn't it? And I think the early rounds for all of these guys before the GP25s get up and running and get everything sorted out is the best time to strike. And Alex at the moment has been striking when he needs to. So yeah, I think he's going to be up there. I don't see any reason why, as you guys point out, the satellite Ducatis have gone well there. Alex is in the best form of his career. He's got a bike that's working brilliantly. At the test again, it was just working on setup, trying to. I think they were almost exploring options, not even necessarily to find lap times, but just to see if we change this, how will it change the bike? If they came up against high grip situations, he said, I think strangely can sometimes cause problems for them because it changes the balance of the bike. So they're working on things that the factory guys probably don't have a chance to do because they've got parts to test and everything else. So again, I think it's all just working for Alex at the moment. It's all there, and just don't change anything.
That's it. That's pretty much the prescription, isn't it, Alex? Just don't change anything, because I think it's a testament to his season. Even look back, he's 11 points better off than Jorge Martin was at this point last year. Wow. Which is really, I think that's the most impressive stat for me. When people talked about Martin's consistency, Alex is doing that the exact same. I don't know if he's been sitting over the winter and went, how can I beat my brother? Well, Jorge Martin, I can just look at him and it's like identical to it almost, which is, I think the finishing second thing would maybe get some riders down in their confidence, like, I'm second again. But Alex just kind of went, it's fine, sort of thing. And that's really, it's good, isn't it, that way, Lewis? Where he's going, no problem with me, my win will come eventually.
If you're second, if the guy in front of you crashes, and you're the first in line to take advantage of that, and that's it. And that extends to things like tyre pressure penalties as well. If you're in the right position, guy in front gets a tyre pressure penalty for whatever. Like we saw in Thailand, for example. It was in some ways fortunate that Marc Marquez was as fast as he was in Thailand, because if Alex Marquez was a bit quicker, especially in those early stages of the race, Marc would have struggled to get his tyre pressures under control. So it's stuff like that. We saw it in Qatar, obviously, with Maverick and Marc, was the fact that Maverick tried to kind of rectify the situation, but Marc was too quick for him. So, you just have to be there, because there are more variables now in MotoGP to take advantage of. This is, the racing maybe hasn't been the most exciting this year, but from another perspective, it's certainly been a lot more unpredictable. You think to, well, like I say, Thailand with the tyre pressure thing, you go to Argentina, and we didn't expect Alex Marquez to be leading for as long as he was there. Austin with the start chaos and the crash from Marc, and then Qatar with just the way that race went. It's been very, very unpredictable. And largely through it all, the one person that's been the constant there has been Alex Marquez, and I just think being in second, he has no reason to kind of not to be angry about it, because ultimately the pressure's not on him to win the championship. The pressure isn't even on him to fight for a championship. The pressure from Ducati is on Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez. If Alex Marquez can get in there, fantastic. That's all he has to do. And it's very much a Jorge Martin situation from the past few years, and riders like that. You think back to Bastianini in 2022. Yep. These riders are not expectations on them. So that frees them up to basically take up some risks, but also be patient in the results. And I think if there's one rider that's had patience through his career, it's Alex Marquez. We think there was a lot of those difficult years in Moto2, a lot of those difficult years on the Honda, a lot of years of having to, play second best to Marc, to be compared to Marc, to be criticised for only being where he is now because of his surname. Alex Marquez has maybe been the most patient rider in the paddock, and now that patience is paying off, and all of a sudden that patience isn't going to leave him. So it's maybe the one key weapon he has, more than his speed, more than anything else. The key weapon he has over the rest of them is is that patience to know that the pressure's not on him, but if he's just bides his time, the situations will arise for him, as he saw in Jerez, and that's what wins you championships as much as raw speed does.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect summary of Alex Marquez. He doesn't have the pressure. His brother does, Pete, and 2 crashes. Yes, he remounted in Jerez and somehow scores 4 points, which, I mean, his pace was pretty special on a banged up bike. What do you think? He's kind of came around and said, "Yeah, I just made the mistake. I was just pushing a bit too much with the crash on the Grand Prix at Jerez." He comes into this circuit for Le Mans. It's very, very good for Marc Marquez. It suits his riding style. It suits him on the Ducati. We've got evidence of that last year of those 2 brilliant rides in the sprint and the Grand Prix. Does he do what he did in Qatar and bounce back, or is he going to be thinking, just don't make a mistake, sort of thing? Does that make sense? Or what way does his mindset come into this Grand Prix?
Yeah, he's definitely not going to want to make any more mistakes, is he? It must be frustrating for him to only fallen 3 times this year, and 2 of them are in races, aren't they? And,
yeah.
That's got to weigh on his mind, and he'll be looking for a mistake-free weekend. It gives hope to the others, though, doesn't it? Not just that Marc could make a mistake, but also we saw that the Quartararo taking the fight to Marc, if you like, to keep the lead. Bagnaia fighting with Marc and actually getting the better of him in those early laps. I think that gives a little bit of confidence to the others that, you can. The only chance you've got really to beat Marc Marquez is before he escapes, isn't it? So you've got to stop him from leading early on, and those guys showed that it is possible. And Marc's in a difficult situation because he knows he's got the pace. So for him to get involved in an all-out battle in the early laps would be almost a bit foolish, because if it goes wrong, everyone will say, well, you would have passed these guys later in the race anyway. But on the other hand, you've got, as Lewis has mentioned, things like tyre pressures.
Yep.
So, if the team is saying, look, Marc, we're expecting you to lead most of this, therefore you need to get into the lead early on, otherwise you're going to start to struggle with a higher tyre pressure than the other guys, and things like that. So there's a lot for Marc to think about, I think, even though he is clearly the fastest guy, and I think we're all expecting him to have the pace again this weekend. And it just shows a little bit of vulnerability that it was Rossi always used to say, wasn't it, the sharks are always circling, aren't they? And they're waiting, even when you're at the top of your game, that people are waiting for you just to drop your guard or show a little bit of vulnerability. And this is 2 mistakes in a couple of races, isn't it? At the worst possible time on the Sunday race. If it was in the sprint, as we saw, it's half points, not the end of the world, but he's given up potentially 50 points already. 50 points. That's when you look at what's decided championships in recent years, 50 points is a lot to have lost, isn't it? After only 5 rounds. So yeah, I think the main thing for him is just problem-free weekend, stay out of trouble, and show that you have still got the pace and everything in place. But as I say, the others are there saying or thinking, yeah, we've got a chance. Let's take the fight to Marc, at least in the early laps, and see if we can interrupt his game plan, if you like. Stop him leading.
Yeah, that's really it. Just kind of bloody his nose, Lewis, isn't it? Just let him know that we're still here behind you. Don't think you've got it all your own way. And I think and I like it when he gets kind of like this, then he gives a bit back as well, and then we get that sort of, you want that MotoGP. Yes, he can go out and lead, but when you see them fighting with each other, it's like, yeah, this is what it's all about. You want to see the best riders go at it with each other, and I think that the nature of Le Mans, the first sector, is perfect for that type of scrap, because you've got the turn 1, turn 2, and then you get it down the hill. You can go round there and then down to, is it La Chapelle, the long left? I think it's just an absolutely brilliant layout for racing. I think we could get that, because it was proven last year. Marc cutting through the pack, he can't do it, but if he wants to, say, I don't know if he wants to have a battle with someone, this circuit's pretty good for it, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Like Pete says, they've just got to beat him up. He knows. He said as well before he crashed, like, if he couldn't get through, then he knew that his late race pace was gonna see him through at Jerez. So there is, he knows how to play the game. But yeah, the others, the only thing they could do is disrupt him and force him into mistakes. And Jerez, Le Mans, is a great place to do that, like you say, Jordan, because there's lots of corners where you can push people wide. You can you could really there's a lot of multiple line corners there. A lot of where you can push people off into mistakes and stuff like that. We saw a couple of times last year. Riders being forced off through the chicane. Towards the back of the circuit. Remember, I think Aleix Spargaro happened to him, and he was very, very unhappy about it. And Bastianini did it. I think he did it to 2 people in that race. But
that's right.
There's a lot of. Le Mans quite old school in that it really kind of a lot of the corners are set up in such a way that depending on how brave you are is how far you push it, and if you overstep the limit then you are there are a lot of places where you can get caught out. So his rivals will know that. He'll know that as well though, and I think that's the other thing is that he will, with all that kind of said, with everything that's happened, he will want to go out there and just lead from start to finish and dominate and go, look, okay, yeah, I make mistakes, but when I'm on my game, none of you are getting any closer to me. So we'll see. He knows. Marc does also know as well from the past few, his title-winning years, that he doesn't have to win every race. He knows that banking those points when he can't win them is more important. And okay, he's made 2 mistakes and lost 50 points, and yet he's only 1 point off the championship lead. That goes to show quite a lot about the results for the rest of the season so far. So yeah, there's definitely, he doesn't have to panic about any of it, and I think the others will need to still step up their game to try and duff him about and keep him down, because you give him an inch and he will not hesitate to take it.
Absolutely. And just to point out, if he wins the sprint, it'll be the first time anyone's ever won 6 in a row, which is, in the sprint era, it's pretty impressive to come out the gates and just win 6 in a row. So let's see what he can do there. Finally, predictions. Pete, who do you think's going to win both races at the weekend?
Yeah, I think looking at his form and especially at the track last year as well, I can see Marc doing the double, to be honest. I think he's going to have to fight for it, but I think it's not a particularly risky prediction, is it? But I think certainly at the start of the weekend, let's see what the weather does. Let's see what happens along the way. As we've said, it's the kind of track where things happen. People end up in Q1 that shouldn't be in Q1, that kind of thing. But I think on paper, for me, Marc is clearly the guy to beat.
Lewis?
Yeah, I'd sort of have to agree with that one. You look at just maybe Alex Marquez can get up there, maybe take a sprint win away from him, but so far we've only seen 2 riders capable of winning races right now. Well, we saw obviously Pecco won in Austin, but on pure kind of, he needed things to go his way for that one. So yeah, I'd like to see Pecco up there. I'd really, really like to see him get up there and get the championship properly going and actually on even terms beat the 2 Marquez brothers, because we haven't really seen that. He got the better of him in Austin, but again, Marc was 2.5 seconds up the road, so had it not been for the crash, there wasn't really going to be a change there. So yeah, I think Marc for the sprint and probably the Grand Prix as well, but who knows? I was wrong at Jerez with my predictions, so I got them the wrong way around. Yeah. So we'll see. But hopefully we just see a proper fight. Fundamentally, I don't care who wins. I just want to see a good race. We make these predictions, and people then start to get a bit kind of pissy with us. Where you're being unfair in this ride or whatever. Fundamentally, I couldn't give a crap who wins the race. I just want to see a good race. I want to have good interest. I want to have interesting things to write about. There's only so many times you can write about how brilliant Marc Marquez is. We've been doing it for the past 12 years, so I'd like something different to write about. So I don't care who wins, just as long as it's a good race.
Yeah. I think Joan Mir's going to win. I'm only joking. I don't think Joan Mir's going to win on. I would love it now, so I would absolutely love it.
Is this when Joan Mir wins next Sunday and you're going to come back on the podcast and it's like, well, I told you.
I told you. I wasn't joking. I was being serious. But no, I'm going to go your predictions for Jerez, Lewis. I'm going to say Alex Marquez for the sprint, just so he completes the set of having a Grand Prix and a sprint win. Maybe things come back to back, so maybe he'll get it there. And I think Marc's will win the Grand Prix. If the conditions are like last year and the way he was on that 23, he was outstanding. To do what he done against Jorge and Pecco was brilliant to watch, honestly. 24. I keep thinking of Alex Marquez. That 24 is so good, and maybe he does have Jorge Martin's GP24, that bike that just, I don't know. Maybe it's the one, the consistent one that always is just there. And I think, say Alex could just do something. And say we got the two Marquez brothers together in a battle, and I would love to see how that would play out, because people I've seen say they criticize Alex for not even trying to attempt to overtake his brother, which I think is like, really? Do you don't think he would try to overtake him if he had pace? I think we could actually get it maybe this weekend. So yeah, I think Marc's going to win the Grand Prix, but I would love to see just a proper scrap for it, like we've seen in the past. So yeah, that's our predictions. And if Joan Mir does win, I'm claiming that one, by the way. So yeah,
Fair enough.
If any Honda wins, I'm claiming it. So I am, because I think that, yeah, it would be absolutely amazing. So it would, but yeah, let's see what happens throughout the weekend. To say the weather could change like that, no problem. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I say, I'm at the Northwest as well this week, so no doubt it'll probably rain there. So I hope it doesn't rain in Le Mans for the MotoGP. So if you enjoyed this episode, do the usual. Comment. Let me know your predictions in the comments. Be brave. Give me a prediction. Don't hide behind them. Don't delete them if they go wrong. Yeah, and see, if you're listening on the podcast, send us them on Instagram or Twitter. Your predictions, I always like reading them. It's always interesting to see why people think a certain way. And yeah, if you're listening as well, hit the 5-star review button. It helps us out massively on the charts, helps us boost it, and it gets us in there for the other sport podcasts. So yeah, greatly appreciate that. And until next time, we'll see you for the review. Take care.